We dive into another mock draft Monday, this time where the Ravens trade down. Next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. Of course, we're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube. In today's episode, it's brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline, as we covered the season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And we're back here. It is another Monday edition of the show. Another week of Ravens talk coming off of the holiday weekend. So happy holidays to everybody who did celebrate. And we're going to be talking a lot of draft this week and a lot of draft next week and a lot of draft the week after that too, because we're getting into the thick of things here in draft season. Just under 2 weeks to go. Next week is draft week. And then after that, of course, we'll be breaking down everything relating to the Ravens draft class. At that point, we'll know for all the months that we've been talking about who's it going to be? Where is this guy going to go? We're going to know in a really short amount of time. I'm really excited to know about it. But here today, we're going to dive into another mock draft Monday. And we talked about a trade up scenario last week. So this week, we're going to be talking about a trade down scenario. So I'm really excited to get into this. I posted this on Twitter for my mock draft Sunday. I think that I got a pretty good haul, all things considered, trading down from the 14th overall pick. So we'll talk about that in the first segment here today, my 7-round mock draft. Then in the second and third segments, we'll just go full-on mock drafts from Twitter. We got a ton of them again, and it's really exciting just to think about where I was a year ago and all the mock drafts I was getting then. I really liked doing that last year. This year we've gotten even more, and it's really exciting to really see that grow. So thank you to all those who have submitted your mock drafts. And if I don't get to it here today, I'll try to get to them throughout the rest of the week. So full-on mock draft show here today because it's about that time. We're getting closer to the draft. So before we do that, be sure if you're here with us on YouTube so you can see my face and my background, like the video, subscribe to the channel. We put out daily Ravens content here in video form 5 days per week, Monday through Friday. So if you want daily Ravens content, up to the minute happenings on the Ravens every single weekday, be sure to subscribe to the channel. We're building a really, really awesome Ravens community here. And even people who aren't Ravens fans, if you just want Ravens news, we're here for you as well. So thank you to everybody who's already subscribed. I appreciate you. And for those who are going to subscribe in the future, I appreciate you as well. And everybody listening here today or just watching in video form. And in audio form, it's the same exact show. So we do the same in video and audio. And in audio, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, we're there 5 days a week as well. So thank you to everybody who is listening. Be sure to follow, turn notifications on, and also be sure to follow me on Twitter at KOstreicher34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. So with all that being said, we're going to dive into it here, starting with my mock draft, my 7-rounder that I did for mock draft Sunday, bringing out here today. And so this is a trade down scenario. And I only did the one trade down from pick 14. I didn't really want to get into 2, 3, 4 trade downs. I wanted to just kind of keep it simple. So the trade down that I did involved the Green Bay Packers, who with the Devontae Adams trade have 2 first-round picks in number 22 and number 28. I think if the Ravens want to get value in the later half of the first round, which I think there is value there are opportunities, and I think the Packers are one of those opportunities if they maybe want to move up for a wide receiver at 14. So I traded pick number 14 and number 76 for 22, 28, and 171. I think overall is pretty fair. The Packers get the extra mid-third round pick in there to move up to 14, but the Ravens get the 2 mid to late first round picks plus an extra 5th rounder in there to make it 11 overall picks. And at pick 22, I picked Andrew Booth Jr., the cornerback out of Clemson. He's in the Big Four. The Big Four, Sauce Gardner, Derek Stingley, Jet McDuffie, Andrew Booth Jr. Booth is kind of like the 4th man in there. He's had some injury issues and, it's kind of impacted his draft status a little bit, but he's a baller. He's a baller. He's always around the ball, it seems like. And when you put on the film, he's always trying to make a play on the football. He's had amazing one-handed interceptions and just leaping through the air. He is an athlete in every sense of the word, and he is probably going to be a first-round pick. And there are rumblings that, hey, there's a team that can maybe take him in the middle of the first round, like a round where the Ravens are picking 14, 15, 16, like in that area. So I wouldn't be shocked if the Ravens took him at 14. I also wouldn't be shocked if in a trade back they would take him around to pick 22. Booth is someone who I think could contribute right away, but doesn't necessarily have to, assuming Humphrey and Peters are fully healthy. Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters. But as a third cornerback, the Ravens don't necessarily have to trade up for a guy like Derek Stingley or Sauce Gardner. Those guys are great, right? I would love to have one of those guys in Baltimore. I'm sure many others would. But there are many other corners that can make that impact, such as Trent McDuffie and Andrew Booth. And would I rather have Booth or one of the top two guys? Probably one of the top two guys. But that's not saying Booth can't be a very solid player with the way that it's just a fiery competitor and everything that he does on the football field. I think that he would be a great fit in the Baltimore defense, especially at pick number 22. And then at pick 28, I picked David Ojabo, the edge out of Michigan. Now, we were talking about David Ojabo before his obvious Achilles injury that set him back a lot. We were talking about him as a prime candidate for number 14 for Baltimore. And obviously the Achilles injury, it throws a wrench in that. I wouldn't pick Ojabo at 14 if I were the Ravens, but I think in a scenario where you can get 2 first-round picks, get an immediate contributor like a Booth, and then I think that affords you the opportunity to wait on a player like Ojabo, whether he does come back in the middle of 2022 or if you have to wait the full year. I think that's fine. Ojabo is someone who has very, very great athletic tools, very gifted, and is someone who I think with a lot of coaching, a lot of just training up, will be a very, very good edge rusher. And thinking about that opposite of Dafe Owe, the two went to high school together. That's a big storyline. The Michigan connection with Mike McDonald. It just feels like a fit. And that's why at 14, I was really ecstatic about the possibility of him coming to Baltimore. It feels like he's just a fit on and off the field. So with Ojabo, his athletic traits, he does need a bit of coaching. He's new to the position and everything. So I think for me, he'd be a fine investment in the later first round. I think that he is a player that deserves to be drafted in the first, at the very latest, like mid-second round. I don't think he's dropping past the second round at all. A team will probably take a flyer on him in the late first round, and that's what they should be doing. So for the Ravens, I think that'd be a great flyer to take and just take a swing at those athletic gifts, especially if you can get a playmaker at 22 like Booth. Then at 45, I took George Pickens, the wide receiver out of Georgia. Now, Pickens has been a very popular pick for the wide receiver train, and I am definitely on the George Pickens of Baltimore in the second round wide receiver train, much more than I am on the first round wide receiver train to Baltimore. Pickens is a tall wide receiver, doesn't have the most built out frame yet. I think he just have to add some strength at the next level, but he can contort his body to make really amazing catches and is a really, really good route runner. And so if he can add that mass and add that frame and just build in a little bit, I feel like he can be that big bodied, not just tall, but also big bodied wide receiver that the Ravens really do need on this team, and that they were hoping Miles Boykin could be, and it didn't really work out, and it hasn't really worked out so far, but I think Pickens could be a player to keep an eye on for Baltimore at 45. Then at 100, Kellen Diesch, the tackle from Arizona State at 100. Diesch is very athletic, can get to the second level, doesn't have a ton of power, but he understands how to use his athleticism to his advantage, and I think he can grow as a tackle, someone who can step in if they really need him to if you're Baltimore. Like if Ronnie Stanley, again, doesn't get back to 100% when they feel like he could have or when they wanted him to, I think Diesch could be that player, and they need to invest in the tackle position, and I think Diesch is one of the players who has kind of seen a rise over the last couple of months. It's from a day 3 pick to a day 2 pick, and I think he'd be a good investment at 100 for sure. Number 110, I picked Neil Farrell Jr., the defensive lineman out of LSU. Now, Farrell's he's an athletic player, can push the pocket a little bit from the defensive line position. He does need to improve in run defense, but I think if you're the Ravens, you have enough really solid run defenders where you can take a chance on a player who has the pass rushing upside, can be better in the run game, but can improve there. So you still, Calais Campbell, Michael Pierce, etc. You have those guys still. I think you can take a chance on a young defensive lineman who might have to improve in that area, and who better to learn from some of those guys like Calais Campbell, right? So I think that's a really solid pick for me there. Josh Jobe, the Alabama corner, was my selection at 119. The Ravens do need cornerbacks, and with Booth already being off the board here for me, I took another one in Jobe to make sure they have that depth. He's a player who, very aggressive tackler, first of all, that can lead to some missed tackles, can be grabby at times, very aggressive in that way as well. Who does that remind you of? A little Marlon Humphrey there, but is very solid overall, good fundamentals. I think for a mid-round corner, you could do a lot worse than Josh Jobe. And again, the Alabama connection, we all know what the Ravens love with that Alabama connection. So another, I think, like a Ravens pick, in my opinion. And then at 128, Jalen Weidermeyer, the tight end from Texas A&M, is my pick. The Ravens have a need for a third tight end. We've known that for a long time now. And Weidermeyer is someone who is a great receiving option. He's a big, tall tight end, has some sneaky speed, does need to improve in the run game, shows effort there. But I think if he can get that aspect of his game up, he can be that middle of Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle, which the Ravens have missed so much since Hayden Hurst did depart. Then at 139, Zaquandre White, the running back from South Carolina, is the pick for me. Now, Zaquandre White has had a very interesting journey, or he had an interesting journey at the college level, and he doesn't have a lot of tread on his tires in terms of actual carries and everything. And I think that's what teams are looking for, or at least it's an asset for teams who are looking for a running back. Guys who haven't had 800 carries or 900 carries in college, that's a good thing. White is someone who is very shifty for his size. He can line up in multiple different areas of the offense. He's a good route runner, can line up out wide. And for a third running back who might have to take on a bit more of a role depending on the health of Dobbins and Edwards, depending on what that is, I think White could be a very nice investment in the fourth round where you don't have to spend a second round pick on a running back in this draft because it is very deep, starting in like the end of the third round and going throughout the rest of the seven. So I think that's something that the Ravens could look at for sure. Then at 141, Amari Barno, the edge from Virginia Tech, is the pick. Now, Barno made some waves at the combine with his athleticism, and he is someone who is a very tall edge rusher and someone who I think really make an impact on this team. And with the Jabo not being ready and everything, I think that he could have some type of a role early on if he is picked. He's someone who does do well in the run game, but more so uses his athleticism there instead of setting an edge, I would say. He doesn't really have the functional strength at this point to do that, I think, at the NFL level. So if he can, again, add that strength, I think that'd be a great pick for Baltimore. But overall, pass rushing upside, it is clearly there with Barnard to be a great pick in the fourth round there. And at number 171 in the fifth round, the other pick the Ravens got from the Packers, I took Jesse Luketa, the edge from Penn State. And Luketa is someone who I think is in the middle of an edge and an inside linebacker. PFF has him as an edge. That's the one I use for trades. But I think Luketa overall could play both. And so this isn't necessarily me taking a pure edge player back to back. I think you can line him up in multiple areas. And I think with Baltimore, I think still being able to draft an inside linebacker if they so need to or so want to, Luketa gives them that positional versatility and gives them something to work with both at edge and at inside linebacker, depending on where they see him most. They could use him at both, give him kind of a hybrid type role. So I like this pick a lot, especially with the value. And finally at 196, Luke Wattenberg, the center from Washington, is my selection. And Wattenberg is someone, very smart football player, someone who doesn't have, again, the most strength, but has a very solid anchor in pass protection in the run game. He can get to the second level. Someone who I think if you're going to invest in him, I think getting a late sixth round center is something that the Ravens could look at because they feel confident in Patrick McCary. They've said Tristan Colon. I mean, they have options. So getting another center wouldn't hurt, but I feel like they don't need to invest the 14th pick in Tyler Linderbaum, for example, right? They have options in the later rounds. I think Wattenberg is another player who you can invest in and be very happy with the value that you get. And as we've talked about on the show before, the Ravens haven't historically invested a ton draft capital or money-wise in the center position, and Wattenberg would certainly follow that trend. So overall, I like this draft class a lot, I like this mock draft a lot. Very smart football players, athletic football players, some room for improvement in some different areas, but I mean, look, no draft pick coming out is going to be absolutely 100% perfect, right? You're going to have to work with some of these guys. I think getting a Jabo is a risk the Ravens can take with having 2 first-round picks and trading back from 14, technically only 8 spots, picking up an extra first, giving up a third, and getting back a fifth. I think that's an overall very solid trade. So I like this draft a lot, and I'm excited to see how this Ravens team ends up working the 14th pick, whether they trade up, trade down, etc. We'll head into our first break here, though. When we get back, we'll be diving into mock drafts from Twitter. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Still a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. But first, let me tell you a bit about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your stats and sports info for the betting world. And the Denver Nuggets were in the NBA playoffs right now. The NBA playoffs are all amazing games so far. Some blowouts, that includes Nuggets, unfortunately, who got it handed to him by the Golden State Warriors in game 1. They play again tonight, game 2, so hopefully that's a bit better. But if you want to bet on that game, the Nuggets and the Warriors, or any other NBA playoff game, be sure to do it with BetOnline. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. We have MLB, NHL in full swing. Everything is in full swing right now, except for football, which is kind of sad. But we'll get to football again soon. So head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back here. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still hanging out with you here. And we're going to dive into mock drafts from Twitter now. Again, how I do these is I read them in the order I see them in the comments. So I'm not favoring any mock draft over the other. And we're just going to read through them. We're going to talk about the picks, talk about positional value, et cetera, et cetera. So this will be a fun one. And we're going to start off with a mock draft from Outstanding Brandon, who says, did I just win the Ravens a Lombardi in 2022? Yep, sure did. At CashSugar34, give me your thoughts on your next mock draft episode of the podcast, please. Well, I will certainly do that right now, Brandon. Thank you for tagging me in this one. And first, the Ravens, there are trades. I can't see the actual specs of the trades, but I see Trent McDuffie, the corner from Washington, is the pick at number 28, followed by Roger McCreary, the corner out of Auburn, at 44. Boye Mafe, the edge from Minnesota, is the pick at 45, followed by Travis Jones, defensive tackle from Connecticut, at 55. Nick Bonito, edge at 76 from Oklahoma, followed by Leo Chanel, linebacker from Wisconsin, at 110. Rasheed Walker, offensive tackle from Penn State, is at 128. And Luke Fortner, center from Kentucky, is at 139. And if there are any more picks, I think it's cut off, but that's all I see here. And honestly, this is a really good mock draft. The cornerback duo of McDuffie and McCreary, 1-2 at 28 and 44. The Ravens are set there. You have Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, Trent McDuffie, Roger McCreary. Yeah, you're good for a while there, and you don't have to feel necessarily overly pressed to add another guy. Like, I would still add a veteran in free agency, but it's not like the Ravens would be devoid of depth. They have the players there. Then you get Boye Mafe and Nick Bonito at 45 and 76. And the middle sandwich between them is Travis Jones, who the Locked On Ravens listeners seem to love Travis Jones. And a lot of other people do. I like Travis Jones a lot too. So I think that's a great pick. But defense, first 6 picks, because Leo Chanel is the linebacker from Wisconsin, who gets picked at 110. Then the offensive line comes in with Rasheed Walker, Luke Fortner. I like this a lot. I do like this a lot. I'm sure some people wouldn't be happy with the first 6 picks defense. I'm sure they'd want an offensive tackle somewhere. Rasheed Walker at 128 is probably not going to happen. I mean, a lot of these, Trent McDuffie 28, that's probably not going to happen. Bonito 76, probably not going to happen. Walker 128, probably not going to happen. But you take what the mock draft simulator gives you, and I applaud Brandon for doing that. So this is a really solid mock draft. I actually really, really like this one. So shout out to Brandon for this one. Next, we're going to get a look at a mock draft from Matthew Seamus, who says, JJ is an obvious pick. I hope he's there. Walker is arguably the best running back in the draft and will be a good addition. Tolbert has nice size and break tackle ability. I'm willing to take a flyer on Clark. His depth is the name of the game for Sanders. Yes, I took 2 running backs. I like pass catch. All right, so the pick is at number 21, Jermaine Johnson, the second, the edge out of Florida State. How the Ravens got 21 is Matthew traded the 14th pick and the 119th pick for 21, 54, and 85. So Jermaine Johnson was the pick at 21. Kenneth Walker, the third, Michigan State running back, is the pick at 45. Jalen Tolbert, South Alabama wide receivers at 54. Perion Winfrey, Oklahoma defensive lineman, at 76. Kellen Diesch, tackle from Arizona State, at 85. Damon Clark, linebacker from LSU, is at 100. Jai Sanders, Cincinnati edge, is at 110. Lucas Smith, Virginia Tech guard, is at 128. Noah Ellis, Idaho defensive lineman, is at 139. Rashad White, Arizona State running backs at 141. And Brad Hawkins, safety from Michigan, is at 196. So yeah, first of all, Jermaine Johnson, 21, amazing value. Love that pick. Probably not going to be there. But again, you take what the mock draft simulator gives you. So good on Matthew for doing that. Yeah, Kenneth Walker III is a very interesting selection. I'm not on the train of the Ravens taking running back in the first 2 rounds. I think the third is where I'm looking to get a running back if I'm the Ravens at the very earliest. I just think there are other needs, deeper positional values there than running back. And just, I'm not saying I don't like Walker as a prospect, but I'm saying I would probably take him at like 85 as opposed to 45. Is he going to be there at 85? Probably not. But that's what I'm saying. So I think Walker's a very nice prospect, somebody who could help the Ravens out. But I think a running back at 45 is a little too far out of my wheelhouse. I'd get on board with it if it happened, but I just feel like for right now, it wouldn't be my thing. Jalen Tolbert, I really like a lot, though. I think he's underrated, honestly. I don't think a lot of people know about Tolbert, and he's the guy who I feel like if he's selected, people would be wondering, oh, where's Pickens, right? Because George Pickens has been the guy for a lot of Ravens fans, but I feel like Tolbert would be a very nice option as well. Perion Winfrey is 76. I feel like it's a steal. I think he could go end of first round. I think that could be a realistic option for him. I think the more realistic option for him is middle of the second round, so getting him in the third round is an absolute steal. We talked about Deesh. Then you have another edge with Majai Sanders. You get offensive line depth. Again, there are two offensive linemen taken with Smith and Deesh. So that's right in the wheelhouse, something I think is the right amount of offensive linemen for the Ravens. Two running backs, yeah, again, I'm not on board with two running backs. I feel like, again, they're more positional value. Safety also 196 here. Like, I think the Ravens could take a tight end, and then there are actually no cornerbacks selected in this draft. So I think that I would probably, replace, let's say Kenneth Walker with a corner like Roger McCreary, and then taking Rashad White at 141. I think that's where I would do. But I still like the players in this draft class. Like Noah Ellis is underrated. I think Sanders is a really good edge rusher in the mid-round. So I like this draft. I just feel like there could be a couple of positions that are switched up here and there to make it a bit more value in terms of the actual needs. But again, we have seen the Ravens also value best player available, so it wouldn't be too far-fetched if there are a couple surprises in this mock draft for the Ravens. So good job here by Matthew. Next, we're going to take a look at a mock draft from Akai, who says Karlaftis will be a top 10 edge rusher within 4 years, especially if paired with OA, one speed, one power, and if we have an inside rush. Our secondary will feast on pressured throws if the quarterback isn't sacked first. All right, so the Ravens trading. First, the Ravens take George Karlaftis at 14 out of Purdue. Then the trade. The Ravens trade 45 and 119 for 35, where Jalen Peachy, the defensive back from Baylor, is the selection. Zach Tom, Wake Forest, tackles the pick at 76, followed by Luke Fortner, the center out of Kentucky at 100. Jelani Woods, Virginia tight end, is the pick at 110. Kevin Austin Jr., Notre Dame wide receiver at 128. DeMarco Jackson, Appalachian State linebacker, 139. Alante Taylor, cornerback from Tennessee, is at 141. Dreon Ely, Mississippi running back, is at 213. And how the Ravens got to 213 is they traded 196 for 213 and a seventh in 2023. Yeah, Karlaftis is an interesting prospect for me. I would trade down to like 18, 20 for Karlaftis. I think that you could potentially still get him there. Like maybe not. Of course, you always have to run the risks with trading down for players, because if you have it with a specific target in mind where it's, let's say it's Karlaftis or bust for the Ravens, and then they trade down to 18, but the team at 16 likes him, or there's a trade up to 16, and then they take him, you got to run that risk. But I think for Karlaftis, he's someone who, if the board falls the way of like, all right, there's no Jermaine Johnson, there's no Sauce Gardner, there's no McDuffie, et cetera, Karlaftis will be fine. I think he's fine, but for me, it's more of a optimal trade down candidate. Petrie is somebody who I think is getting undervalued, and I think this is around the range he will go, in the 35, 45, 55 range. He's a very versatile piece, can play in a lot of different positions on the secondary. We talked about him actually in my first ever mock draft money for this year, where I got him in like the 5th round or something, and I'm like, I'm taking that every day of the week. So Petrie is a really nice player. You get the tackle and center depth back-to-back with Tom and Fortner. Jelani Woods, super intriguing athlete. Kevin Austin Jr., solid wide receiver. I have no idea why Alante Taylor got an F grade here. I like Taylor. There are some areas of his game he has to work on. He is not a perfect prospect, but I feel like at 141, that's pretty decent value. I think he's a 4th round player. I think that's fine, maybe 5th, but yeah, I like the Alante Taylor picking up the extra 7th. That's also very solid. So a nice mock draft here from Akai. Getting Karlaftis, who again is more of a trade down candidate for me, but I wouldn't be mad if they made him the pick. I know some people would be. It wouldn't be the optimal pick for some, but again, if the top 4 edge guys are off the board, the Ravens view Karlaftis as 5, and they don't feel like they can get him in a trade back scenario, they might just say, look, we're going to take him a little bit earlier than we would like to, and that's sometimes what happens there. So a good mock draft here from Akai. And finally, we'll take a look at a mock draft from Eric Zickafoos Jr. before heading into our second break. And he says, traded back and got Penning at a better value while filling most of the needs. So Eric has the Ravens trading pick 14 and a round 2 in 2023 for 22 and 28. So the same scenario I did with 22 and 28, just trading a little bit different of a package for it. So then at 22, the Ravens get Trevor Penning, the tackle from Northern Iowa. Then at 28, Jalen Petrie, there he is. Jalen Petrie, defensive back from Baylor at 28. Nick Bonito, edge from Oklahoma at 45, followed by Dylan Parham, the guard from Memphis at 76. Damian Pierce, running back from Florida at 100, followed by Marcus Jones, the corner from Houston at 110. Neil Farrell Jr., the LSU defensive lineman at 119, and Jalen Weidermeyer, the Texas A&M tight end at 128. Chris Paul, the tackle from Tulsa at 139, and DeMarco Jackson, Appalachian State linebacker, 141. And finally, Chika Okonkwo, tight end from Maryland at 196. So this is funny, actually. There was the same two picks traded for in the first round, 22 and 28 is in my mock draft. And Eric has the Ravens taking Neil Farrell at 119 and Jalen Wydermyer at 128. I had the Ravens taking Neil Farrell at 110 and Wydermyer at 128. So kind of some similarities there. It's kind of funny. But yeah, so Penning is a very interesting prospect. He to me is a late first, early second round guy. There are just too many things to clean up for me to have confidence in him playing immediate snaps. And look, hopefully the Ravens wouldn't need him to play immediate snaps, right? Hopefully at the tackle position, Ronnie Stanley is healthy and Morgan Moses has another great durable season and Penning wouldn't have to play. Now, there have been questions about whether Penning is a tackle or a guard. I think he can play both. I think the versatility is nice. I wouldn't pigeonhole him into one or the other just to kind of devoid him of the other one. I think that's still fine to have him have the positional versatility, but I think for Penning, there are too many technique things he has to clean up and just learn. I think a lot of people fell in love with the Senior Bowl tape where he just was throwing guys around. I think that was just after the fact where he was getting bullied by some of these defensive linemen, pushing him back. I'm not saying he's not a good prospect, but I'm just saying there is a lot of work to be done. So I think teams should take that with a bit of caution. 22 is not overly a reach. I would still probably take him in like the 28-30 range, in my opinion. So maybe where Petrie was picked here, but I like the Petrie pick a lot. Benito at 45, solid selection. Damian Pierce, one of my favorite running backs in this class, just offers a ton. Marcus Jones is really underrated. A corner from Houston, really, really underrated player. Then there is more tackle depth. You get Penning and Chris Paul from Tulsa. Two tight ends I'm not overly sure about. I feel like maybe there's room for another edge player instead of just getting Benito. Maybe instead of Wydermyer at 128, there's an edge guy, 196. You can get an edge guy. So I feel like two tight ends might be one too many tight ends, but I still like the value here from Eric Zickafoose Jr., especially in the mid rounds where there are guys like Benito, Parham, Pierce, Jones, etc. What into our final break here on Locked On Ravens. Still a ton to come, though, talking about more of your mock drafts from Twitter. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And we will be right back. But first, let me tell you a bit about Built Bar. And so this is the time of year, again, people give up on their New Year's resolutions, but don't do that this year. And if yours is to eat right, do it with Built Bar. If you haven't tried the Built Bar Puffs, you are really missing out. They're the first ever protein-infused marshmallow, which means they're fluffy and marshmallowy, and they're really just not a protein bar. They are a treat. They're really, really good. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and they have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. There are a ton of great flavors. Also, my favorite is mint brownie, but there's also coconut almond, and so much more. So be sure to go to built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15. Get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. We're back here. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you again. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. And we have really exciting things coming up for the NFL draft here on the Locked On Podcast Network. On draft night, Thursday, April 28th, be sure to tune into the Locked On NFL Draft's live coverage of the draft with all 3 days of real-time analysis from our extensive lineup of experts and insiders. And where you can find it's on the Locked On NFL Draft Live, which is on the NFL Draft YouTube page. You can also have the Odyssey NFL Mock Draft on Odyssey and Locked On NFL podcast feeds. And you are going to be able to tune in April 28th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, April 29th, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, April 30th, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And the Odyssey NFL Mock Draft runs from April 18th to the 22nd and finally on the 25th. And also be sure to make Locked On NFL Draft your second listen of the day with Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker. So a lot of fun stuff coming up on the Locked On Podcast Network. But we're going to dive into now our final batch of mock drafts from Twitter. Starting off with a mock draft from Truth Good Medicine, who said, "This is mine done today." So a ton of trades. All right, we're going to read through them. First, the Ravens trade 14, 110, 196, a round 1 in 2023, a round 3 in 2023, and a round 5 in 2023 for 16, 19, and 49. Then the Ravens trade 16 and 76 for 18, 51, and 101. Then 18, 101, around 5 in 2024, and around 6 in 2024 for 21 and 54. Then 19 and 100 for 23 and 55. Then 23 and 66 and 119 and 139 for 29 and 30. Wow. All right. So the Ravens picking up some value in these drafts, trading a lot of future picks, but ending up with 29 and 30 while being able to get a lot of the first and second round picks. So the Ravens, this is probably not going to happen in real life, but like here, the Ravens take Zion Johnson, Boston College guard at 29, Jalen Petrie, corner from Baylor, defensive back from Baylor at 30. Then the Ravens end up trading 21, 55, 128, and a fourth and 141. Or the fourth 141 for 32, 34, and 66. So that's why the Ravens didn't have 21 at the end of the day there. So Baltimore then takes Boye Mafe, Minnesota edge at 32. Kenyon Green, Texas A&M guard at 34. Leo Chanel, Wisconsin linebacker at 45. Logan Hall, defensive lineman at 49. George Pickens, wide receiver at 51. And Tyler Smith, Tulsa tackle at 54. So the reason I wanted to read this one, because look, are the Ravens going to make this many trades in this short amount of time and giving up the futures? No, probably not, right? But this goes to show how deep this class is in the back half of the first, early part, mid part of the second round. There are a lot of prospects that the Ravens could take in that area. And I think Truth Good Medicine here kind of highlights that by taking, the guys like Boye Mafe, Kenyon Green, Logan Hall, George Pickens, Zion Johnson, all these guys who could go in the 25 to 45 range. If Baltimore wants to trade back, pick up 2 firsts and an extra second, for example, they could get a haul with 4. If you have 4 top 45 picks, or there's anywhere from you have 22, 28, 30 some, and 45 or something like that, you can get 4 really solid prospects and still have the mid-round ammunition to fill out the rest of your needs. I think that's something to keep an eye on for sure. So the Ravens going to make all these trades? Probably not, but I think Truth Good Medicine does a good job of highlighting just the amount of solid prospects there are in the late first, early second round. Next, we'll look at a mock draft from James Lee Katz, who has the Ravens taking Jermaine Johnson edge at pick 14, Perion Winfrey, the defensive lineman at 45, Dylan Parham or Jamar Saylor, offensive lineman at 76. Then you have Rashid Walker at 100, Darian Beavers at 110, at 119 and 128. He says 2 corners of Jalen Amore Davis, Cam Taylor-Britt, Caleb Evans, Damari Mathis, and Zion McCollum. 139, Zamir White, running back. 141, Jesse Luketa, linebacker. 141, and then 196, Daniel Bellinger, tight end. So this is a really interesting way to do this, and I appreciate James for writing this out for me. Jermaine Johnson, Perion Winfrey, 1-2 duo, getting good on the front 7. I like that a lot. Then one of Parham or Saylor. If I had to pick one, I'm going to pick one. I'm going to say it's Saylor. I think Parham's really, really good, and there's been rumored interest by the Ravens, according to some sites. But I feel like Saylor has the positional versatility to play all 5 spots and can slot in at center if they need him to, and I think that would be a better pick there. Rashid Walker, I love it. I love it 100. I don't think he's going to be there, but I would love him to be there. 2 corners of Amore Davis, Taylor-Britt, Evans, Mathis, McCollum. I'm probably taking Britt and McCollum, in my opinion. Cam Taylor-Britt and Zion McCollum. If you can get those 2 guys, I feel very confident in the Ravens' depth there. Zamir White, I like as a running back a lot. Luketa, we've talked about. I like him as a hybrid edge inside linebacker guy, and then Bellinger's a solid tight end in the later round. So good job here by James Lee Katz. Next, we'll take a look at a mock draft by Coach Scott Phillips, who has the Ravens trading up. They trade 14 and 110 to the Seattle Seahawks for pick number 9, where the Ravens take Trayvon Walker, the edge from Georgia. Then 45, Kyler Gordon, the Washington corners at 45. Josh Pascal, Kentucky edge at 76. Rashid Walker, tackle from Penn State at 100. Cam Taylor-Britt, Nebraska corner at 119, followed by his Nebraska teammate Cam Jurgens, the center, at 128. Ayoma Uwazurike, the Iowa State edge at 139. Hassan Haskins, Michigan running back at 141. And Christopher Hinton, the Michigan defensive lineman, at 196. Yeah, there's the rumbling that Walker's going to go number 1 to Jacksonville. It's been out there for a while, and it seems like the steam as we get closer to draft time is picking up a lot when it comes to Trayvon Walker. So I'm interested to see how that goes, but Walker at 9 would be a steal. I think he's probably going top 6 or 7, so to get him there to get him at 9 would be really amazing, honestly. Gordon, I like a lot. I know some people aren't as high on him as guys like Roger McCreary or some of the other second-round cornerbacks, but I think Gordon's very solid, honestly. We talked about Rashid Walker. Love him at 100. Cam Taylor-Britt with Kyler Gordon. I like that pairing. Cam Jurgens, I like him as a center prospect. Hassan Haskins, one of my favorite running backs in this class. So a good job here by Coach Scott Phillips getting 2 edge guys, 2 corners, 3 edge guys. 3 edge guys, 2 corners, 2 offensive linemen, and you get the defensive line, the running back in there too. So good best player available, good need-based draft. This is a solid one by Scott Phillips for sure, by Coach Scott Phillips. And finally, we're going to take a look at a mock draft from Barrett King 89, who has the Ravens trading 14 for 18, 51, and 237. The Ravens take Jermaine Johnson, the edge, at number 18. Leo Chanel, the Wisconsin linebacker, at 45. Martin Emerson, the Mississippi State corner, at 51. Alec Pierce, the Cincinnati wide receiver, at 76. Matthew Butler, Tennessee defensive lineman, at 100. Najee Sanders, edge, at 110. Kobe Bryant, Cincinnati corner, at 119. And then Weidermeyer, tight end from Texas A&M, at 128. Braxton Jones, Southern Utah, tackle at 139. Alec Lindstrom, Boston College, center at 141. Devontae Price, Florida International running back at 196. And Matt Araiza, there he is. Matt Araiza rounding out today at 237 in the 7th round. We haven't heard some Matt Araiza I think we heard him a lot last week. Didn't hear him a ton this week so far, but there he is to round it all out. So Barrett King giving some punter love. Punters are people too. But yeah, again, Jermaine Johnson, if he's there at 18, I'm doing backflips around the Ravens. Chanel's a really nice linebacker. I think he is one of the more underrated ones in this class, but he's had a rise a little bit, I think. Alec Pierce is a big body wide receiver. I think he's a really solid option for them. Matthew Butler, defensive lineman out of Tennessee, we've talked about a lot here on the show before. Same thing with Kobe Bryant, the Cincinnati cornerback, Ethan Weidemeyer, Texas A&M tight end, we talked about on this show before. Alec Lindstrom, again, F grade. I understand he's not the most flashy prospect, but I like that pick a lot more than PFF does. So really solidifying the defense in the first 3 picks and continuing that. I think what is his first 7 picks? There is 1 offensive player selected. Then you round out the rest of the draft here with some solid best player available, need-based draft as well. I like this draft a lot from Barrett King at 89. But that's all I have here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back here tomorrow, we'll be diving into more Ravens talk. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you tomorrow.